Picture this. You wake up, drink your coffee, sit down at your desk, and 8 hours later, you've barely moved. You got your work done, you ticked boxes, you did everything right. So why does your brain feel like it's wrapped in wet cement by 3 p.m.? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Your chair might be doing something to your brain that no amount of coffee can fix. We're living in the most sedentary era in human history. The average American now sits for more than 10 hours a day, at desks, in cars, on couches. And while we've been told that sitting is the new smoking for our hearts and our backs, almost nobody is talking about what prolonged stillness actually does to the brain, not the body, the brain. Welcome to Calm Science, where we take the intimidating stuff from neuroscience and cognitive psychology and make it feel like a conversation worth having.
Today we're going deep on this one. We're going to cover why your brain actually needs physical movement to think clearly, what specific chemicals drop when you stay still too long, why that mid-afternoon mental fog isn't laziness, but biology, and most importantly, what you can actually do about it that takes less than 5 minutes. Let's start with something almost everyone has experienced. It's around 2 or 3 in the afternoon. You've been sitting for hours. You stare at your screen. The words stop making sense. You reread the same sentence 4 times and still don't know what it said. You're not tired. You slept fine. You're not sick. You just feel offline, like someone quietly dimmed the lights inside your head. Most people reach for a second or third cup of coffee. Some scroll their phones, some just push through and feel guilty about how unproductive they are. But none of that gets to the root of what's actually happening. Because what you're feeling isn't a personal failure. It's a physiological response, and your brain is sending you a very clear signal that you've been ignoring. Go deeper. The science. Here's where things get really interesting. Your brain is not a passive organ that just sits there while you think. It's alive, it's hungry, and it needs blood flow to function at full capacity. When you sit for long periods without moving, the circulation of blood to your brain begins to slow down. Studies show that cerebral blood flow, the rate at which oxygenated blood reaches your brain, can drop measurably after just 1 to 2 hours of continuous sitting. Think of it like this. Your brain is a high-performance engine. Blood flow is the fuel line, and when you're still for too long, the fuel line starts to narrow. The engine doesn't stop, but it runs rough. Now here's the part that most people completely overlook. It's not just blood flow. There's a protein at the center of this story that most people have never heard of. BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. BDNF is sometimes called Miracle-Gro for the brain. That's not an exaggeration. It supports the survival and growth of neurons, helps build new neural connections, and is directly tied to your ability to learn, remember, and focus clearly. And here's the critical thing. Research confirms that a sedentary lifestyle can reduce BDNF levels in the brain. Less movement over time means your brain literally has less of the chemical it needs to stay sharp, adaptable, and resilient. And here's the part most productivity advice skips entirely, and it changes everything about how you should think about your workday. The hormonal domino effect. When you stay seated for hours without a break, your body begins to read that stillness as a form of low-level stress. It's not dramatic, you're not in danger, but your nervous system starts to drift toward a state of sustained activation. Cortisol, your primary stress hormone, begins to accumulate. Research shows that elevated cortisol levels are directly associated with impaired executive function, the brain's ability to plan, decide, focus, and regulate emotions. That 3 p.m. fog isn't caffeine wearing off, it's cortisol quietly undermining your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for everything you need to do good work. At the same time, dopamine, which drives motivation, curiosity, and that feeling of being on, starts to decline. Your brain becomes less interested in the task in front of you. Attention fractures. The urge to check your phone spikes. A 2023 analysis found that prolonged sedentary conditions contribute to mental fatigue, causing up to 20 to 30% decrease in cognitive reaction time.
And the truly sobering part, most people adapt to this foggy baseline and assume that's just how they function in the afternoon. They never question it. They just assume they're not morning people, or that they need more sleep, or that focus is just hard for them. But it might simply be the chair. What's wild is that the fix isn't complicated, but the reason it works will surprise you completely. The fix is movement, not more effort. Here's where the science becomes genuinely hopeful. You don't need to run a marathon. You don't need a standing desk or a gym membership. Research on breaking up sedentary time is remarkably consistent. Even short bouts of light physical movement, a 5-minute walk, some gentle stretching, even standing and doing a slow walk around the room can measurably improve cognitive performance within minutes. Why? Because movement immediately increases cerebral blood flow. It triggers a fresh release of BDNF. It nudges dopamine and serotonin levels upward. It resets the hormonal cascade that prolonged sitting sets in motion. High-intensity aerobic exercise groups in studies show up to a 15% improvement in memory tasks and a 20% improvement in executive function. But even light activity interrupts the negative physiological spiral of unbroken sitting. The brain doesn't distinguish between serious exercise and just moving. It responds to the signal, and the signal is simple. You're alive, you're active, feed me. I want you to sit with something for a moment. No pun intended. We live in a culture that glorifies stillness as productivity. The image of success is someone locked in a chair, staring at a screen, grinding for hours without pause. We treat movement as a distraction, a luxury, something you do after the real work is done. But your brain was never built for stillness. It evolved in a body that moved, that walked, climbed, foraged, explored. The thinking you're most proud of, the creative leaps, the clear decisions, the moments of real insight, they've almost never happened while you were slumped, stiff, and still. There's something quietly radical about accepting that rest and movement aren't the enemy of your work. They are the work. They're the biological infrastructure that makes everything else possible. You are not a brain in a jar. You are a nervous system woven into a body, and that body is not a vehicle for carrying your head from meeting to meeting. It's the engine that keeps the mind alive. So the next time you feel that afternoon fog roll in, that heavy, dull, unfocused feeling, don't reach for caffeine, don't push through, don't blame yourself. Get up. Move, even for 5 minutes, not as a break from your work, as an act of respect for the brain doing it. Before we wrap up today, I want to ask you something, and I genuinely want to know your answer. What time of day do you feel the most mentally foggy? Is it mid-morning, that 3 p.m. slump, or does it creep up on you right after lunch? Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one, and I think the answers are going to be really telling for all of us. Because here's what I'm curious about. How many of us have been calling our own fog a personality trait, when really it's just been a pattern we never had the language to explain? If today's episode gave you a new way to think about your energy, your focus, or your relationship with movement, then this is exactly what Calm Science is here for. Come join the community. Subscribe if you haven't already. Every episode, we take one thing you feel but can't explain, and we give it a name, a mechanism, and a way forward. That's it for today. Thank you for spending this time with Calm Science. Now, seriously, go take a walk.